The claim I'll be responding to is Amber's argument that unlimited screen time will negatively affect a child's development. She supported her argument by making the points: 1, unlimited screen time has a negative health effects on children. 2, as a result of excessive screen time, children's social skills are lacking. And 3, video games and mobile games install a false interpretation of the real world, which also hurts a child's development. Although she makes some notable points, I'll be arguing against this claim and arguing that unlimited screen time will not negatively affect a child's development. Amber's argument and points are insufficient to prove her point is valid. I'll be proving this by displaying how screen time increases hand-eye coordination, can be educational, and increases visual attention to detail. For example, she first goes over how limited screen time has negative health effects on children. This argument is ineffective due to lack of development involved in defining all parts of her claim. She doesn't define screen time, which can already make it very hard to prove her point without exact devices and categories included in her research. On top of this, she lacks the evidence necessary to prove that it is actually detrimental to a child's development. Amber stated that playing video games increases probability for a child to become overweight, and the light emitted from screens interferes with the sleep cycle. Although this could be a factor, there's no clear cause-effect stating that screen time is the sole cause of that. She is making a generalization that this is the case for all children with problems with being overweight, when there is probably many other factors influencing the child. She needed to prove a strong correlation with just screen time and the child's development, because without controlled data, we don't know what variables are affecting the situation or causing these results. Furthermore, Amber also cited a study in 2016 stating physical pain is caused by excessive screen time, such as head, neck, and wrist, being at odd angles causing pain problems when children get older. Although this information is valid, it's not enough to prove her message fully. Some other pressing damage that may be caused by screen time includes eye problems like computer vision syndrome, where 50 to 90% of people are affected, including children. So this is an example of something that affects more of the wide population instead of just like smaller details that could be like linked to other issues. According to computer vision syndrome specialists, kids who stare at tablets or use computers during the day at school can have issues too, especially with lighting and the posture if they are less than ideal. With these additions to her argument, it could have been more strongly proven. A benefit I would like to point out is hand-eye coordination. According to DG Parenthood website, hand-eye coordination is essential as children begin school when they learn how to use their hands and eyes while writing and drawing. These are exceptions in which screen time does help the child who is using these devices to learn these skills. Amber's second claim was that as a result of excessive screen time, children's social skills are suffering. The theory on the second point is theoretical and doesn't have any real cases that are documented. In a theoretical situation, it might be effective in proving your point, but realistically, lots of theoretical approaches aren't ideal to prove your point because things don't always go as planned, and without real practices, there's no credibility to prove whether it's an accurate depiction or not. In the second part of her second point, you say that parents are ultimately hurting their child when they hand them a tablet saying, "Stay busy." This statement is not always true, and there should be some limitations put onto that. You say that it makes students reliant on screens, but in our advancing technological world, everything is now on screens. And according to benefit and risk of screen time for kids and parents, which is ran by a parent group, for children under 8, the majority of the time spent on screens is educational content. So it shows that for people who are actually using screens child-wise, they're actually using it most of the time on educational content, and it's actually benefiting them. Amber's last claim was video games and mobile games install a false interpretation of the real world, which also hurts the child's development. The advocate states some valid evidence, but it's very lacking as you only state 2 statistics with no reasoning afterwards or further explanation. The warrant connecting your secondary claim to your grounds is non-existent, and therefore, based on those 2 facts alone and no limitations, without the further backing given, we can't really say that your point is always valid. The sufficiency of reasoning and evidence results in the audience not being 100% convinced that this is always true, and the argument has been around for a really long time. This idea has been proven by many studies, but your evidence is lacking these statistics and studies that should be mentioned. If I was trying to prove your point, I would use facts like this one by the Fuller Youth Institute. According to Art Bamford, the students who were playing violent games took 450% longer to respond to a person in need than those playing non-violent games. So it shows how people who are playing these violent games, such as first-hand shooter games, they're taking 450% longer to respond to someone in need in the real world. They're more focused on the imaginary world in their games. So it shows that this is a serious issue. With the addition of these facts, your argument could have been strengthened and more convincing. And a benefit I'd like to point out from gaming is the increased visual attention. According to DG Parenthood, gaming and learning applications equips children to pay more attention to detail in order to complete these activities. When these kids play games, they must think ahead about their next move, and which raises visual attention to other activities that aren't in video games. So they think ahead when they're doing any sort of activity about what's the best thing to do next, which one should I do first, stuff like that. And also, according to DG Parenthood, these simultaneous activities train children to pay attention to every detail on the screen in order to achieve the goal of the game. Overall, Amber's claim is lacking in evidence to sufficiently prove her point is valid. Unlimited screen time will not negatively affect a child's development because it increases their hand-eye coordination, can be educational, and increases visual attention to detail. Thank you.
All right, basically on each of the supporting points, you've got this different objective. First is to challenge the reasoning that's being presented by the advocate or the quality of the evidence that's being presented. But 1/3 of the time, you're actually suggesting better evidence that the advocate provided for their case, and that goes the opposite direction. This is not a critique presentation. This is a refutation presentation. And, you know, as a parallel example, I sometimes suggest, like if you were the defense attorney and said, hey, the prosecution failed to present good evidence on this point, like the fingerprint evidence that shows that my client was in fact at the scene of the crime. That's not what you want to be doing. You know, the goal is not to say, I'm going to prove their evidence is bad by giving better evidence than they had to prove that point. That doesn't work. All right, that's not the way you want to be going on, and you do that on at least 2 out of the 3 points, and I think there may be one on the first point as well. The general criticisms are okay. Sometimes, though, you make some criticisms of the reasoning process. Like on the third point, you mentioned that there was something that said, you know, there's no warrant provided here, and I didn't understand your conclusion. Why was there no warrant? What do you mean was what was missing here? You just kind of made that argument and said, oh, they provide 2 statistics and no warrant. I'm going, well, what warrant would have been appropriate, or why don't you see a connection that's being presented here? And I didn't really get an explanation of that. So that's got a little bit conclusionary. Like I said, I think all of the presses that you're providing are pretty good. The counterclaims, though, I think those are good arguments to be making, this, where you're suggesting the alternative, that there is something else that's going on there. I think those are pretty effective, and you provide your own evidence on those points. So more of that, less of the other. All right, thank you.